Have you ever found yourself noticing the pattern like clockwork, not with panic, but with that quiet, unsettling clarity that says, "This is happening again"? People from your past, especially your exes, keep circling back, sometimes softly, sometimes suddenly, sometimes with a casual message that pretends it's nothing while carrying the weight of a whole season. They watch your stories. They like something from weeks ago at 2:13 a.m. They text, "Hey, how have you been?" as if time never happened. They appear in your dreams when you didn't invite them. They show up in your mind on days you're actually doing well. And you've wondered, privately, if it means something. Not because you're weak, but because you're awake. Listen carefully. This is not coincidence. This is spiritual cause and divine effect. And before we go any deeper, and before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Let your mind stop sprinting. Because the first thing you need to understand is that the return of an ex is not always a romance signal. Most of the time, it is a spiritual symptom. It is the echo of an encounter their soul never fully processed. When God places His hand on a person, that person becomes more than a personality. You become a living frequency. You become a carrier of atmosphere. You walk into rooms and things shift without you trying. You leave conversations and people feel a strange quiet afterwards, like the air is rearranging itself. You don't have to announce it. The spiritual realm recognizes it. Your ex recognized it too, even if they never had language for it. They thought they fell for your humor, your warmth, your presence, your beauty, your energy, your vibe. But what they actually encountered was divine imprint. They brushed against the peace of heaven flowing through a human vessel, and whether they honored it or mishandled it, their spirit stored the memory. That is why the past doesn't stay past with you. Not because you are cursed, not because you are irresistible in an ego-driven way, but because when you love, you don't love shallow. You love with weight. You love with substance. You love like someone who has been taught in secret how to pour without pretending. And that kind of love doesn't evaporate when the relationship ends. It leaves residue. It leaves spiritual handwriting on the walls of their inner world. You need to hear this clearly, because it will protect you from confusion later. Their return is not proof they are your person. Their return is proof you are marked. And being marked does not mean you keep recycling doors that God already closed. Being marked means you interpret patterns correctly. It means you stop letting the same bait hook you just because it has your favorite label on it. So let's name what's been happening without drama, without shame, without fantasy. When your ex returns, it often happens when you're rising, when you're becoming calmer, when you're not posting for attention anymore, but for expression, when you're no longer begging life to make sense, because you've started moving with quiet direction. That's when they feel it. People think distance kills connection, but spiritual memory does not obey geography. Some people don't miss you when you're available. They miss you when your energy stops reaching for them. They miss you when you stop checking to see if they watched your story. They miss you when you stop leaving a door cracked in your mind. Because the moment you withdraw your spirit from a place it used to cover, the place becomes colder, the same way you notice when a lamp is turned off. They notice when your light no longer spills into their world. And that is why they circle back. Not because they suddenly became pure, not because they completed a miraculous transformation overnight. Often, they circle back because the false replacements didn't work. The new distractions didn't heal the old hollowness. The noise didn't quiet the inner ache. And now their soul is doing what souls do when they run out of counterfeit peace. It reaches for the last place it remembers feeling anchored. That's you. But here is the twist. The chosen ones must learn early if they want to keep their calling intact. Your presence can feel like home to people who never learned to build home inside themselves. Your kindness can feel like salvation to people who refuse to face their own chaos. Your calm can become a drug to someone who lives on emotional storm. And if you don't understand this, you will misread their attraction as love when it might be dependence. You will misread their apology as fruit when it might be hunger. You will misread their return as destiny when it might be a test. This is why we start here. Because in this message, you are not being trained to romanticize your magnetism. You are being trained to steward it. You are being trained to recognize that your light is not a toy for people to pick up and put down whenever they feel lonely. Your light is a sacred thing. And if you are honest, you already know this. You felt it in the way you can sense a person's motives without them saying anything. You felt it in the way your body tightens when something is off, even if their words are sweet. You felt it in the way peace leaves the room when you entertain the wrong connection, even for a moment. That's not you being too sensitive. That is discernment waking up in your nervous system. That is your spirit learning how to guard the gate. Now I want you to remember something from your own story, and this will be a callback you come back to later when the temptation tries to dress itself in nostalgia. Think about the relationship that drained you the most. Not necessarily the loudest one. Sometimes the most draining ones are the quiet manipulators, the ones who didn't scream, but slowly rewired you. Think about how you felt at the end. Think about the fatigue that wasn't just emotional but spiritual. The sense that you were always explaining yourself, always adjusting, always shrinking a little so they could feel bigger. And then think about what happened after they left. At first, it hurt. Of course it did. Because even toxic patterns can feel familiar, and familiarity can trick your brain into calling it love. But then, after the grieving, there was a strange relief. There was breath. There was quiet. There was this subtle feeling of your spirit returning to your body, like you had been living slightly outside yourself and finally came home. That relief was not random. That was heaven restoring your atmosphere. That was God returning you to yourself. So if your ex is circling back now, you have to ask a different set of questions than you used to ask. Not, do they miss me? Because people miss what they lost all the time. Not, do they still love me? Because people confuse love with longing constantly. The real question is, what is their spirit reaching for? Is it you, the healed version, the aligned version, the boundary-carrying version? Or is it the old version of you that would answer quickly, forgive easily without change, reopen doors with one apology, and let them drink your peace until you felt empty again? Because many exes are not attracted to your future, they are attracted to your access. They are attracted to the benefit of being near you, while refusing the responsibility of growing with you. And if you don't name that, you will keep calling cycles connections. You will keep calling hunger love. You will keep calling spiritual restlessness fate. Chosen one, hear me gently. You are not being punished by God because people return. You are being shown evidence. Evidence that your light is real. Evidence that your healing is noticeable. Evidence that your absence has weight. But you must interpret evidence correctly. A knock at the door is not the same as a key. Someone can knock because they're curious, desperate, bored, lonely, regretful, or spiritually irritated by the emptiness they created. But only God gives keys, and keys come with peace, clarity, and alignment, not confusion, urgency, and pressure. That's why, in this first section, you are being calibrated. You are learning the difference between attraction and assignment. Many are attracted to you, few are aligned with you, and alignment is what your destiny requires. Let's go deeper into the spiritual mechanics without making it spooky. In the natural world, when you spend time with someone, you learn their habits, you learn their voice, you learn the small things that make them feel safe. In the spiritual world, something else happens. Your energy teaches their nervous system what peace feels like. Your presence becomes a reference point in their inner world. If they grew up in chaos, your calm feels like medicine. If they grew up around manipulation, your sincerity feels like sunlight. If they are used to love being conditional, your steady care feels unreal. And whether they honored it or not, their body remembers, their mind remembers, their spirit remembers. That's why, even years later, when they encounter stress, they sometimes think of you, not consciously as strategy, but subconsciously as survival. Because you became associated with relief, and when life presses them, they reach for relief. Now I'm going to say something that will challenge you, but it will also free you. Sometimes your ex isn't drawn back because they want to love you better. Sometimes they're drawn back because they want to feel better. Those are not the same. Loving you better requires repentance, maturity, responsibility, consistency, and fruit. Feeling better requires only access. And access is what your past will always try to negotiate. The enemy doesn't need to ruin you with obvious evil. Sometimes, he just needs to reintroduce the old pattern at the exact moment you're about to step into new territory. That's why the timing always feels suspicious. Right when you're regaining confidence, right when you've stopped chasing, right when your prayer life is becoming steady, right when you're building something. That's when the past pings your phone, like a ghost tapping the glass. But chosen one, you are not haunted. You are being tested, and tests are not designed to shame you. They are designed to reveal what is now true about you. This is where you shift your posture. You stop reacting like the old version of you. You stop answering from emotion. You start observing from wisdom. You start asking, what is this returning to teach me? Because sometimes God allows a return not for reunion, but for closure. Not closure through conversation, but closure through comparison. You see the message and you realize, this doesn't move me like it used to. You hear the tone and you realize, I can feel the same old hunger beneath new words. You feel your spirit stay calm instead of spiraling. And in that moment, you don't just get information about them, you get confirmation about you. You have grown, you have healed, you have been upgraded. Your discernment is sharper, your boundaries are stronger, your peace is no longer negotiable. So as we move forward, keep this thread in your hand, because we're going to weave it through everything that comes next. Their attraction is real, but it does not automatically mean alignment. Your magnetism is powerful, but it must be governed. Your light is noticeable, but it must be protected. And the goal of this message is not to make you feel superior. The goal is to make you sober, calm, clear, steady. Because the chosen one doesn't panic when the past returns. The chosen one interprets. The chosen one blesses. The chosen one discerns. And the chosen one keeps moving. Say this quietly to yourself as you settle into the truth of this section. I am not confused. I am being shown. I am not being pulled back. I am being invited to choose forward. And in the next section, we're going to name what this really is at the deepest level. How your anointing becomes a living frequency, and why people confuse spiritual resonance with chemistry, even when it's the hand of God that made you impossible to forget. You need to understand something deeper now. Something that shifts this conversation from psychology into spiritual mechanics, without turning it mystical or vague. When God places His hand on you, He doesn't just bless your circumstances. He tunes your frequency. You become someone whose presence carries weight, even when you are silent. This is why your life has never fit neatly into ordinary explanations. You've noticed it since you were young, how people open up to you without knowing why, how strangers trust you quickly, how some people feel calmer just sitting near you, and how others feel inexplicably uncomfortable even when you've done nothing wrong. That is not personality. That is anointing translated into atmosphere. Your spirit emits something that registers before words ever arrive. And once someone has experienced that frequency up close, it doesn't fade just because the relationship ended. Frequencies don't obey logic. They imprint. They linger. They recalibrate what the nervous system thinks peace feels like. This is why your exes don't simply remember you as a person. They remember you as a feeling. And feelings tied to spiritual regulation are some of the hardest things for the human soul to release. Here's where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think attraction is about chemistry, compatibility, or unfinished business. But what you carry goes deeper than desire. It's resonance. When two instruments are tuned to the same note, one vibrating causes the other to respond, even from a distance. In the same way, your anointing vibrates at a frequency that awakens something dormant in others. When you loved someone, you didn't just give attention. You gave regulation. You gave emotional safety. You gave spiritual steadiness. You didn't even realize you were doing it, because to you, it felt natural. You were just being yourself. But to them, it felt like rest. It felt like being seen without being judged. It felt like breathing without bracing. And when that presence is removed, the body notices, the soul notices, the nervous system panics. That panic is often misinterpreted as love or longing, but it is actually withdrawal from peace. The same way a body reacts when a stabilizing element is suddenly removed. This is why so many exes return confused. They don't always want the relationship back. Sometimes they don't even want you back as a partner. What they want is the feeling their body remembers being near you. They want the calm they borrowed. They want the clarity they absorbed. They want the grounding they never learned to generate on their own. And because they don't understand the spiritual mechanics of it, they reach for the source instead of developing the discipline. They come back to you instead of going to God. And this is where chosen ones often get trapped if they don't become conscious of their role. You start believing it's your responsibility to regulate others. You start feeling guilty for moving on. You start thinking your peace belongs to the people who miss it. But peace is not communal property. It is a stewardship. And God did not cultivate yours just so it could be drained by people who refuse to mature. Notice something important here. The people most magnetized to you are often the people least capable of sustaining what you carry. They feel your frequency as relief, but they experience your truth as pressure. They enjoy the calm, but they resist the accountability. They like how you make them feel, but not what you require them to face. That's why the connection feels intense at first. They lean into your presence because it stabilizes them. But over time, the very same frequency that calmed them begins to expose what's misaligned. Your consistency highlights their inconsistency. Your honesty highlights their avoidance. Your depth highlights their fragmentation. And instead of rising to meet the frequency, they pull away from it. This is not because you were too much. It's because they were underdeveloped for the level of clarity your spirit carries. This is where the confusion begins for chosen ones. You start asking, if they were so drawn to me, why couldn't they stay? But attraction and capacity are not the same thing. People can be deeply drawn to something they are not ready to maintain. They can crave healing without committing to transformation. They can love the fruit without respecting the root. And when they leave, They don't leave because the attraction disappeared. They leave because staying would require growth. And growth is uncomfortable for the unprepared. So they go, not healed, not changed, but still imprinted. That imprint is what brings them back, not because time made them wiser automatically, but because life without your frequency eventually exposes the deficit. They try to recreate what they had with you through other people, other relationships, other distractions. But imitation cannot replicate illumination. They meet people who are exciting but not grounding, entertaining but not regulating, available but not anchored. And eventually, the nervous system remembers the difference. The soul remembers the contrast. And that memory pulls them back toward you, even if they don't understand why. They call it missing you. They call it unfinished feelings. But what it really is recognition of a frequency they have not found again. This is why the timing of their return often coincides with moments when you are no longer reaching outward, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop chasing clarity, when you stop seeking validation, when your life becomes quieter but more solid. That shift is not invisible. Even from a distance, people feel when your frequency stabilizes at a higher level. It disrupts old energetic agreements. The subconscious knows when access has been revoked, and when access disappears, those who benefited from it feel the loss more intensely. That's why they suddenly show up when you're doing better, not worse. Not because they helped you heal, but because your healing removed their supply. Now hear this carefully, because this will prevent guilt from creeping in. You are not responsible for what your frequency awakens in others. You are responsible for how you steward it. God did not anoint you so you could become a resting place for people who refuse to build internal stability. He anointed you so you could reflect His presence without distortion. When someone is drawn to you, it does not automatically mean you are meant to re-engage. Attraction does not equal assignment. Resonance does not equal reunion. Many people are drawn to prophets, but not everyone is meant to walk with them. Many people are drawn to light, but not everyone is willing to live in truth. This is why discernment becomes non-negotiable at this stage of your life. Discernment is not suspicion. It is clarity without paranoia. It is the ability to feel without being pulled, to observe without absorbing, to bless without binding. When an ex returns now, the question is no longer, do they feel something? Because the answer is almost always yes. The real question is, have they developed the capacity to meet what they are drawn to? And capacity is revealed not by words, but by energy. Not by promises, but by presence. Not by intensity, but by consistency. Pay attention to how your body responds when they appear. Not your emotions, your body. Do you feel grounded or unsettled? Do you feel calm or compressed? Do you feel expanded or pulled backward? Your body has already learned the language of truth, even when your heart wants to negotiate. The anointing you carry does not live in your thoughts alone. It lives in your nervous system. That's why you sometimes feel tired after interacting with certain people, even if the conversation seemed pleasant. Energy exchange is real, and your system knows when it is being siphoned instead of supported. This is also why God often limits access to you as you mature, not because you are becoming cold, but because you are becoming precise. You don't need to explain yourself to people who benefited from your confusion. You don't need to reopen doors just because someone feels drawn. You don't need to prove that you are loving by offering unlimited access. Love with wisdom is not abandonment. It is alignment. And alignment requires boundaries. So when you notice X's resurfacing, don't inflate the moment, but don't dismiss it either. See it for what it is: evidence of the frequency you carry, confirmation of the peace you embody, proof that what God placed in you was real enough to be missed. But also remember this: what is drawn to your frequency is not always meant to stay there. Some are meant to encounter it briefly so they know what exists. Others are meant to walk with it long term because they are willing to grow. Your job is not to decide this emotionally. Your job is to discern it spiritually. Let this settle into you now. You are not being chased because you are incomplete. You are being remembered because you were impactful. And impact does not require reunion. Sometimes impact is complete once the lesson is delivered. Sometimes the greatest gift you give someone is not your return, but your absence, because it forces them to seek the source instead of the vessel. Hold this truth as we move forward. Your anointing is a living frequency. It attracts, it reveals, and it tests. And the more you understand this, the less confused you become when the past knocks. In the next section, we're going to talk about why your peace feels addictive to people who live in chaos, and how borrowing your calm without changing their patterns creates the exact dynamic that keeps pulling them back. Now let's go one layer deeper, because this is where many chosen ones finally understand why the pattern has felt so emotionally confusing for so long. Your peace is not neutral. Your calm is not passive. Your steadiness is not accidental. To people who live in internal chaos, your presence feels like relief they didn't know how to name. And relief, when someone has never learned to create it within themselves, becomes addictive. Not in a dramatic sense, but in a quiet, nervous system way. When you entered their life, you didn't just bring affection. You brought regulation. You brought rhythm. You brought a sense of order to emotions that were usually loud, scattered, or volatile. Being near you slowed them down. Your tone softened their reactions. Your patience lowered their anxiety. Your consistency made their world feel less unpredictable. And even if they never acknowledged it out loud, their body learned something important around you. It learned what safety felt like. Here is what most people don't realize. Safety is not just an emotional experience. It is a biological and spiritual one. When someone grows up in instability, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, their nervous system adapts to chaos as normal. Calm feels unfamiliar. Peace feels suspicious. Silence feels unsafe. So when they meet someone like you, someone whose energy is grounded, centered, and internally anchored, their system responds immediately. They feel soothed. They feel calmer. They feel more like themselves. They feel less reactive. That's why the connection feels intense early on. Not because it's destiny, but because their system is finally resting. And the body always wants to return to what gives it rest. But here is the problem that chosen ones must learn to see clearly. Borrowed peace is not sustainable peace. When someone relies on your presence to regulate their emotions instead of learning self-regulation, the dynamic becomes imbalanced. You become the stabilizer. They become the dependent. You give, they receive. You ground, they discharge. And over time, you begin to feel tired in ways you can't explain. Not because you're weak, but because you're carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. You start feeling like the emotional adult in the room. You find yourself calming storms that are not yours, explaining things that should not need explaining, managing moods that fluctuate without warning. And slowly, without realizing it, your peace begins to cost you energy. This is why many of your relationships ended not with explosions, but with exhaustion. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you were drained. Or they left because your peace began to feel like pressure. When someone borrows calm without committing to growth, the calm eventually exposes what they are avoiding. Your groundedness highlights their instability. Your emotional maturity highlights their avoidance. Your consistency highlights their inconsistency. And at some point, that contrast becomes uncomfortable. They may accuse you of being distant, boring, too serious, or emotionally unavailable, when in reality, you are simply no longer absorbing their chaos. You stopped buffering their storms. You stopped rescuing. You stopped regulating for two. So they leave, or the relationship collapses under the weight of imbalance. But here is the part that surprises people. When they leave, the peace goes with you. Not because you took something that belonged to them, but because you were the source of it. And once that source is gone, their nervous system goes back into survival mode. The anxiety returns, the restlessness returns, the irritability returns, the emotional hunger returns, and suddenly, they feel worse than before. Not because the breakup hurt, but because the stabilizing presence is gone. That's when the craving begins. That's when the late-night thoughts appear. That's when the dreams start. That's when they check your social media. That's when they feel compelled to reach out even if they don't fully understand why. This is why their return is often fueled by discomfort, not clarity. They don't always miss you. They miss how they felt around you. They miss the calm. They miss the grounding. They miss the sense that life felt more manageable. But missing relief is not the same as being ready for responsibility. And this distinction matters more than anything else in your healing. Because if you mistake their craving for your peace as love, you will reopen a door that leads right back to depletion. Chosen one, hear this without judgment. Many people are attracted to peace, but very few are willing to protect it. They want access to calm without accountability. They want stability without discipline. They want the benefit of your emotional maturity without doing the inner work required to meet you there. That's why the pattern repeats. They come close. They feel better. They lean in. And then when growth is required, they retreat. Not because the attraction faded, but because the work felt too heavy. Then time passes. Life hits them again. Chaos returns. And once again, their system reaches for the last place it remembers relief. You. This is also why God is so intentional about teaching you discernment at this stage. If you keep offering your peace to people who refuse to develop their own, you will always feel drained, confused, and disappointed. You will think something is wrong with you when, in reality, you are just misplacing stewardship. Peace is not meant to be endlessly extracted from you. It is meant to be shared in mutual alignment. When two people are regulated, calm multiplies. When one is regulated and the other is chaotic, calm is consumed. Notice how different this feels from the romantic narrative you were taught. You were taught that love means enduring, that love means absorbing, that love means staying calm so the other person can be wild. But that version of love burns chosen ones out. God's version of love is not self-erasure. It is shared responsibility. It is two people tending the atmosphere together, not one becoming the emotional caretaker for both. This is why your peace feels rare to people who live in chaos, and rarity creates attachment. But attachment without transformation becomes dependency, and dependency is not covenant. It is imbalance. So when your ex returns, carrying nostalgia, emotion, or longing, pause long enough to ask a different question than you used to ask. Instead of asking, "Do they want me?" ask, "Do they want peace or do they want growth?" Because peace can be borrowed, growth must be chosen. This is also why your silence feels loud to them now. When you stop responding quickly, when you stop over-explaining, When you stop emotionally engaging, they feel the absence immediately. The calm they relied on is gone, and absence teaches more than presence ever did. Sometimes God removes you not because you failed, but because the lesson required distance. Your absence forces them to confront themselves. It removes the buffer. It exposes the inner noise they were drowning out by being near you. And here is where you must be careful not to rescue them from that discomfort. Discomfort is often the beginning of healing. When you rush back in to soothe, you interrupt the process. When you respond out of guilt instead of wisdom, you become a barrier to their growth and your own. You are not responsible for regulating adults who refuse to regulate themselves. Compassion does not require self-sacrifice. Chosen one, your peace is not meant to be addictive. It is meant to be instructive. It shows others what is possible. It points them toward God, not toward dependency on you. If someone truly loves you, they will not just enjoy your calm. They will work to meet it. They will protect it. They will contribute to it. They will learn how to bring peace into the space instead of only taking it. So when you feel that familiar pull, that sense that someone from your past is reaching for you energetically, don't panic. Don't romanticize it either. See it clearly. They are remembering the peace they lost. That memory is doing its job. It is teaching them what they lack. Your role is not to refill what God is trying to expose. Let this land gently. You did not fail them. You did not abandon them. You did not withhold love. You simply stopped being the source of something they were meant to cultivate within themselves. That is not cruelty. That is wisdom. And as we move forward, this understanding will protect you from reopening doors that look familiar, but lead back to imbalance. In the next section, we're going to talk about the mirror you unknowingly became for them, how your presence reflected truths they were not ready to face, and why that reflection is one of the deepest reasons they left, and the strongest reasons they still feel drawn back. There is another layer to this pattern, one that goes beyond peace, beyond calm, beyond even attraction. You were not just a source of regulation for them. You were a mirror. And not the kind of mirror that flatters or distorts, but the kind that reflects truth, quietly, steadily, without apology. This is where many chosen ones finally understand why the connection felt powerful, then painful, then unresolved. When someone stood close to you, they did not only feel comfort, they saw themselves more clearly than they ever had before. And clarity is not something everyone knows how to live with. You didn't do this intentionally. You weren't trying to expose anyone. You weren't trying to confront or correct. You were simply being real. You spoke honestly. You showed up consistently. You loved without games. You expressed feelings without manipulation. You held standards without cruelty. And for people who learned to survive through masks, avoidance, or control, your authenticity was disarming. They couldn't hide around you the way they hid around others. Their usual strategies didn't work. Their charm felt thin. Their excuses sounded hollow. Not because you attacked them, but because your presence stripped away the noise they used to avoid themselves. This is what the mirror effect actually is. It is not judgment. It is reflection. When someone is near a chosen one, the contrast between truth and pretense becomes obvious. Your steadiness reflects their instability. Your integrity reflects their compromise. Your emotional availability reflects their emotional avoidance. And this reflection happens silently, continuously, without you needing to say a word. For those who are ready to grow, this feels like awakening. For those who are not, it feels like pressure. This is why many of your exes felt both deeply seen and deeply uncomfortable around you. They opened up faster than usual. They told you things they had never told anyone. They cried without knowing why. They felt exposed, but safe at the same time. That paradox confused them. On one hand, your presence felt like home. On the other hand, it demanded honesty. And honesty requires courage. Courage requires humility. And humility threatens pride. So instead of rising to meet the truth, many chose distance as a way to escape it. This is also why the breakup often didn't make sense logically. There wasn't always a clear fight. Sometimes there wasn't even a clear reason. They just felt overwhelmed, restless, pressured, or not themselves. What they were actually experiencing was confrontation with their own inner world. Being loved by someone who is grounded forces the soul to reckon with what it has neglected. And if someone is not ready to change, the easiest solution is to remove the mirror. But here's the part that matters for your healing. Removing the mirror does not erase what was seen. Once someone has glimpsed their truth, they cannot unsee it. They may suppress it. They may distract themselves. They may blame you. They may rewrite the story to protect their ego. But the reflection remains stored in their consciousness. That is why the connection feels unfinished to them. That is why they still think of you when life quiets down. That is why they still feel a pull when they see you thriving. You didn't just love them. You showed them who they could be. And potential, once seen, becomes haunting when ignored. They saw a version of themselves in your eyes that they did not know how to become. You saw beyond their wounds. You spoke to their better self. You treated them as capable of growth, and when they couldn't live up to that reflection, it created internal conflict. Instead of saying, "I need to change," it often felt easier to say, "This relationship is too intense," or "You're asking for too much," or "I just need space." But space doesn't erase truth. It only delays it. This is why the mirror effect follows you even after separation. When they date someone new, the comparison happens automatically. Not because the new person is worse, but because the mirror is gone. They are no longer reflected back to themselves with clarity. They are no longer gently confronted by consistency. They are no longer invited into growth through love. And eventually something feels missing. Not excitement, not chemistry. Depth, meaning, the feeling of being known without being managed. This is also why they may return with language that sounds reflective. They say things like, "You changed me," or "I didn't realize what I had," or "You made me want to be better." Sometimes this is sincere. Sometimes it is longing without follow-through. But either way, it confirms the role you played. You were not just a partner. You were a catalyst. And catalysts are rarely meant to stay forever. Their role is to initiate reaction, not remain in the mixture. Chosen one, this is where you must release yourself from responsibility. You were never meant to complete their transformation. You were meant to trigger awareness. Growth is a choice only they can make. If they chose avoidance instead, that does not mean you failed. It means the mirror did its job. You revealed something they were not ready to hold. Staying longer would not have helped them grow. It would have slowly dimmed you instead. This is also why God often removes you right when the reflection becomes undeniable. He sees the moment when love would turn into self-abandonment. He sees the moment when you would begin to soften your standards to keep the peace. He sees the moment when you would start shrinking your truth to preserve connection. And he intervenes, not because the relationship lacked potential, but because your purpose is larger than the role of emotional mirror for someone who refuses to change. Now understand this clearly, because it will help you respond differently when they resurface. When your ex reaches out now, they are not reaching for who you were. They are reaching for the reflection they lost. They are remembering the clarity they felt when they were seen honestly. They are remembering the version of themselves they glimpsed but walked away from. That does not mean they are ready to face it now. Sometimes memory grows louder before maturity arrives, Sometimes longing increases before discipline does. This is why you must not confuse recognition with readiness. Just because they see now does not mean they can sustain what they see. The mirror has evolved. You have evolved. Your reflection is sharper now, your boundaries clearer, your standards higher. What once felt like invitation now feels like accountability. And not everyone who admires growth can walk with it. There is another truth here that will bring peace if you let it. Even if they never return in words, even if they never apologize, even if they never acknowledge what you meant to them, the mirror effect still completes its work. Somewhere, at some point, your presence will surface in their memory as the moment they realized what was missing in their life. That realization may lead them to God. It may lead them to therapy. It may lead them to humility. Or it may lead them to deeper avoidance. That outcome is not yours to manage. Your calling is not to chase understanding. It is to remain aligned. Mirrors do not chase those who turn away. They remain steady. They reflect truth without force. And those who are ready will step closer. Those who are not will step away. But the mirror does not change its nature to be more palatable. Chosen one, this is why your growth often triggers unexpected reactions from the past. When they see you more confident, more peaceful, more grounded, the mirror intensifies. Your life becomes evidence. Your joy becomes contrast. Your calm becomes indictment. Not because you are judging them, but because your existence reflects what is possible. And that reflection can either inspire or irritate. Either way, it activates something. So when the past returns, don't ask, why now? Ask, what is being reflected? Often the answer is simple. You have outgrown the role you once played. You are no longer the mirror for their becoming. You are the proof of what happens when someone chooses healing. And proof does not require participation. It requires presence. Let this settle into your body. You did not imagine the depth. You did not exaggerate the connection. You were not too much. You were simply real in a world that survives on performance. And reality always exposes illusion. Some people thank you for it. Others run from it. Both reactions confirm the same thing. Your light was real. As we move into the next section, we will talk about something that explains why the connection still feels alive energetically, even when the relationship is over. We'll talk about soul ties, spiritual memory, and why release does not always happen all at once. This will help you understand the sensations, the dreams, the sudden emotional waves, and most importantly, how to let go without hatred, without fear, and without reopening what God has already healed. Now we move into territory that many people sense, but few are taught to understand clearly. Even after the relationship ends, even after distance, silence, and time, the connection can still feel alive. Not emotionally, in the way of longing, but energetically. Thoughts surface without invitation. Dreams feel unusually vivid. Sudden emotional waves appear on days that seemed calm. You might feel heaviness that doesn't belong to your current life, or tenderness that doesn't match your present circumstances. And for a long time, you may have wondered if this means the connection was unfinished, if something is wrong with you, or if you secretly want them back. Listen carefully. This is not weakness. This is spiritual memory. This is the residue of a soul tie. A soul tie is not something mystical or dramatic. It is simply what happens when two people exchange emotional, spiritual, or intimate energy deeply enough that their inner worlds recognize each other. In God's design, soul ties were meant to bind people through love, trust, faith, and purpose. They were meant to strengthen covenant, not create confusion. But when one person is aligned and the other is unhealed, the tie becomes uneven. One pours, one clings, one grows, one resists. And when that connection breaks, the bond doesn't always dissolve instantly. It loosens slowly, especially when the tie was formed during a season of vulnerability. Chosen one, when you loved fully. You didn't compartmentalize. You didn't withhold parts of yourself. You didn't pretend. You let someone see your inner world. You prayed for them. You held space for them. You believed in their growth, sometimes more than they believed in themselves. That level of investment creates a spiritual thread. And when the relationship ends, the thread does not vanish overnight. It weakens as healing progresses, but until it is fully released, it can still transmit sensation. This is why you may feel their energy even when there is no contact. You might sense a sudden urge to check your phone. You might feel a wave of emotion that doesn't have a clear cause. You might dream of them on nights when you went to bed peaceful. This is not a sign that you should return. It is a sign that the tie is still unwinding. Healing is not always instant. Sometimes it is layered. Sometimes it happens in stages. And God is patient with the process. Here is what matters most. A soul tie does not mean destiny. It means history. It means two lives intersected deeply enough to leave an imprint. But imprint does not equal instruction. Just because something left a mark does not mean it should remain active. This is where many chosen ones struggle. You feel the echo and assume it means you are meant to go back. But echoes are not voices. They are reflections of what once was, not commands for what should be. The reason soul ties feel especially strong for chosen ones is because you impart life when you love. Your presence carries peace, clarity, and emotional safety. When someone bonds with you, they don't just attach to a person. They attach to the state they experienced around you. And when that state disappears, their spirit keeps reaching for it. This reaching can be felt across distance, not because you are meant to respond, but because the other side has not completed its own internal separation. This is also why God often calls you into intentional release. Release is not bitterness. Release is not denial. Release is not pretending the connection didn't matter. Release is the conscious decision to return ownership of energy. It is saying, what I carried for you is no longer mine to carry. And this can only be done from a place of compassion, not resentment. Anger keeps ties active. Hatred keeps cords intact. Forgiveness is what allows the tie to dissolve without leaving scars. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness means you stop letting the past pull on your nervous system. You stop letting memories dictate your present. You stop absorbing emotions that are not yours anymore. And when forgiveness is real, something shifts quietly. The dreams lessen. The emotional surges soften. The thoughts lose intensity. Not because you forgot, but because the bond has been transformed from attachment into understanding. It's important to say this clearly. Not all soul ties break in a single moment. Some require repeated choice. Each time you resist the urge to reach out. Each time you don't replay the conversation in your mind. Each time you bless them silently instead of reopening dialogue. Each time you choose peace over curiosity. These are not small actions. They are spiritual authority in practice. Heaven responds to consistency, not drama. And over time, the tie loosens until it no longer tugs. You may notice something else as this happens. Often when a soul tie begins to dissolve, the other person feels it before you do. They sense the cord weakening. They feel the loss of energetic access. And that is when they often reach out. Not because God sent them, but because the attachment is panicking. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in healing. People assume the timing is divine confirmation, but often it is simply the final echo of a bond losing power. This is where discernment protects you. If someone reaches out right as you feel more settled, more clear, more detached, pause. Ask yourself how your body feels. Does the message bring peace or disturbance? Does it ground you or agitate you? True alignment does not destabilize your nervous system. If your peace wavers, that is not romance. That is residue trying to reattach. Chosen one, you are allowed to end connections without explanation. You are allowed to heal privately. You are allowed to stop responding. Silence is not cruelty when it is chosen for alignment. You do not owe continued access to people who benefited from your unhealed availability. Closure does not always come through conversation. Often, it comes through acceptance. There is also a beautiful truth here that will help you reframe your past. When a soul tie is healed, it does not disappear completely. It transforms. The pain becomes wisdom. The attachment becomes compassion. The memory becomes instruction. You stop seeing the person as a loss and start seeing them as a lesson that refined you. The relationship becomes a chapter, not a wound. And when that happens, gratitude replaces grief. Not gratitude for the hurt, but gratitude for the growth. This is how God redeems connection. Nothing is wasted. Every bond that came into your life served a purpose. Some taught you how to love. Some taught you how to leave. Some taught you how to set boundaries. Some taught you how to listen to your body. Some taught you what peace costs. And when you honor the lesson without reopening the door, you complete the cycle. So if you still feel a pull at times, don't shame yourself. Acknowledge it without feeding it. Say internally, I see you, but you no longer control me. Pray for clarity, not reunion. Pray for release, not return. Ask God to remove what is no longer aligned and to heal what still feels tender, and trust that He is faithful to finish what He started in you. You are not bound to your past. You are not haunted by old love. You are not failing because you still feel echoes. You are simply in the final stages of integration. The tie is no longer active. It is resolving. And soon, what once pulled on you will feel neutral. Not because it never mattered, but because it no longer owns space in your spirit. Hold this truth as we move forward. The soul tie explains why the connection lingered, but it does not define your future. In the next section, we will look at why God sometimes actively keeps people away even when attraction remains, and how protection can look like silence, distance, and closed doors that save you from reopening what would drain you again. There comes a moment in every chosen one's life when attraction and access are no longer allowed to walk together. This is the moment where God's protection becomes unmistakable, even if it feels confusing at first. You sense the pull from the past. You notice the timing. You recognize the familiar energy. Yet every attempt at reconnection feels blocked, delayed, disrupted, or strangely empty. Messages don't land the same. Conversations don't flow. Plans fall apart. Momentum never forms. And you may have asked quietly, if there is still attraction, why does God keep stopping this? The answer is not rejection. The answer is preservation. Protection rarely announces itself loudly. It often appears as inconvenience, silence, or lack of traction. God does not always remove desire instantly. Sometimes He allows attraction to remain while removing access, so you can see the difference. Desire tests your discernment. Access tests your obedience. At this stage, God is less concerned with how you feel and more concerned with what you protect. Because what you protect determines what you become. You have to understand something crucial here. God does not keep people away because they are evil. Many times, He keeps them away because they are unfinished. They have not healed what wounded you. They have not confronted what drained you. They have not taken responsibility for the patterns that once destabilized your peace. And if God allowed them back into your life now, they would not meet the current version of you with reverence. They would treat your growth like a convenience. They would enjoy your clarity while resisting the discipline that created it. That is why heaven closes doors that nostalgia tries to reopen. Think back to the version of yourself that stayed too long, the version that explained instead of observed, the version that forgave quickly but was slow to set boundaries, the version that confused patience with endurance. God remembers that version, even when you try to forget it. He remembers how much energy you lost trying to hold things together. He remembers how your prayers shifted from gratitude to survival. And He refuses to let you return to that posture again. This is why protection can feel frustrating. You may still care. You may still feel compassion. You may even sense that the other person is struggling. But compassion does not override calling. Empathy does not cancel assignment. God did not heal you so you could become a safe place for people who refuse to do their own inner work. He healed you so you could walk forward without dragging the past behind you. Notice how protection works now. When you consider responding, your body hesitates. When you imagine reopening the door, your peace tightens. When you picture the dynamic repeating, something in you resists. This is not fear. This is wisdom. This is your nervous system, aligned with truth. God often speaks through peace withdrawal. When peace leaves, something is misaligned. When peace remains, something is covered. You may have noticed that even when conversations do happen, they feel off. The words sound right, but the energy feels wrong. Apologies sound polished, but they lack depth. Promises sound hopeful, but they feel familiar in a way that triggers caution. This dissonance is discernment. God is training you to listen beyond language. Words can be rehearsed. Energy cannot. True change carries weight. It carries consistency. It carries humility. And it does not rush reconnection. One of the hardest truths for chosen ones to accept is that not everyone who feels drawn to you is meant to walk with you. Attraction does not equal permission. Just because someone feels the pull does not mean God approves the path. Many times, the pull exists because the lesson is not fully integrated yet. God allows attraction to surface so you can practice restraint. Restraint is not repression, it is mastery. You see, the enemy rarely tries to destroy chosen ones outright. That is too obvious. Instead, he tries to distract them with what looks almost right. Familiar energy, familiar voices, familiar emotions. He uses nostalgia as a weapon. He reminds you of the good moments while minimizing the cost. He highlights connection while hiding consequence. And if you are not anchored, you can mistake emotional intensity for divine timing. But God interrupts that cycle. He interrupts with silence. He interrupts with delays. He interrupts with lack of flow. He interrupts by removing the sense of ease that once existed. This is not punishment. This is upgrade. When something no longer flows, it is because your frequency has changed. What once felt natural now feels heavy because you have outgrown the container. There is another layer to protection that many people overlook. Sometimes God is not just protecting you from them, He is protecting them from you. The version of you that exists now is not the same version they left. You carry more clarity, more authority, more self-respect. And if they re-entered without transformation, they would be confronted more sharply than before. God, in His mercy, prevents collisions that would lead to deeper damage for both parties. Protection also shows up as isolation. You may feel more selective, more private, less interested in explaining your journey. This is not withdrawal. This is refinement. When God elevates someone, He often narrows their access first. Not everyone gets to speak into your life. Not everyone gets to re-enter your space. Not everyone gets to benefit from the healed version of you. Peace is expensive. It was purchased through pain, insight, and surrender. God does not discount what He paid to refine you.
This is why every blocked message, every unanswered call, every conversation that goes nowhere is not a failure. It is confirmation. It is heaven saying, this no longer aligns, and alignment matters more than comfort. God is not interested in giving you what feels familiar. He is interested in giving you what sustains your purpose. You may struggle with guilt here. You may think, what if I'm abandoning them? Or, what if I was meant to help them? But hear this clearly. You are not their savior. You are not their therapist. You are not their regulator. You are a messenger, not a manager. What you were meant to show them has already been shown. Staying longer would not add clarity. It would only dilute your boundaries. True divine connections do not require force. They do not require convincing. They do not require you to override your intuition. When something is meant to return, it returns with peace, humility, patience, and evidence of change. Not urgency, not pressure, not emotional flooding. If something feels rushed, it is not from God. God builds slowly and solidly. The enemy rushes because he wants to bypass discernment. So when God keeps them away, even though attraction exists, trust that wisdom is at work. Attraction is a signal. Protection is instruction. And right now, instruction matters more than emotion. You are being trained to choose alignment over appetite, to choose peace over possibility, to choose calling over comfort. Say this quietly within yourself as this section settles. I trust the doors God closes. I trust the silence He allows. I trust the protection I do not yet fully understand. Because one day, you will look back and realize that every blocked path saved you from re-entering a cycle that would have cost you everything you just worked so hard to rebuild. As we move forward, the next layer will explain something even deeper. Why people from your past tend to reappear specifically when you level up, and how the spiritual law of return operates when your frequency rises. This will help you stop seeing their return as confusion and start seeing it as confirmation of how far you've come. There is a spiritual pattern at work here that becomes obvious only after you've lived through it enough times to stop doubting yourself. People from your past rarely resurface when you are struggling. They don't usually appear when you are anxious, depleted, or emotionally reaching. They appear when something in you has settled, when your energy has lifted, when your spirit has stabilized, when you are no longer looking back. This is not coincidence. This is the law of return, activating in response to elevation. Everything carries energy. Every interaction, every emotional investment, every season of your life leaves an energetic imprint. When you loved, you gave from your essence. You planted seeds in places you never revisited. Those seeds don't die just because you walked away. They remain dormant until something triggers them. And what triggers them is not time, it is frequency shift. When your frequency rises, what was once attached feels the movement. This is why the past stirs when you level up. Your growth creates contrast. Your peace creates disturbance in places that once relied on your presence for stability. When you elevate, the energetic contracts you never consciously signed begin to dissolve.
And when something loses access, it reacts. Sometimes quietly, sometimes dramatically, sometimes through dreams, sometimes through sudden messages. The law of return is not about punishment or reward. It is about recognition. Energy recognizes energy. When you begin to embody the lessons, instead of just understanding them, your frequency changes. You no longer operate from need. You no longer chase clarity. You no longer seek closure externally. That internal shift sends a signal, and that signal reaches places you never intended it to reach. People who once benefited from your unhealed availability feel the difference immediately. Not because you announced it, but because access has ended. This is why returns often feel mistimed, yet precise. You might think, why now, when I'm finally okay? That is exactly why now. When you were hurting, your energy was scattered. There was nothing to return to. But when you become coherent again, when your spirit regains its center, it acts like a beacon. Not calling people back intentionally, but revealing where imbalance still exists. Here is the truth most people miss. The law of return does not exist to reunite you with your past. It exists to show you how far you've come. It brings back familiar energy so you can measure the distance. It allows you to see clearly what once felt confusing. It gives you a moment of comparison, not temptation. And if you are grounded, the comparison confirms your growth instead of threatening it. This is why the emotional charge is different now. When they reappear, you don't feel the same pull. The longing is weaker, the urgency is gone. The fantasy collapses quickly. Instead, you feel awareness. You notice patterns you ignored before. You sense what hasn't changed. You feel gratitude for the distance. That shift is not coldness, it is integration. It means the lesson is landing. The law of return also exposes something else. It reveals who was attached to you versus who was aligned with you. Aligned connections rise with you. Attached connections react to your rise. When you elevate, aligned people celebrate. Attached people panic. They feel the gap widening. They sense that the version of you they once accessed is no longer available. And that loss triggers action. This is why some exes return with urgency, emotion, or sudden vulnerability. They feel the cord loosening. They feel the distance becoming permanent. And attachment does what attachment always does when threatened. It reaches. But reaching is not repentance. Longing is not maturity. Awareness is not transformation. And this is where chosen ones must stay sober. The return is not asking you to go back. It is asking you to recognize. Recognize the version of you that would have folded. Recognize the patterns that once confused you. Recognize the growth that now protects you. The law of return is not a door. It is a mirror. It reflects your elevation back to you. There is also a form of divine justice embedded in this law. Those who mishandled your presence eventually feel its absence, not as punishment, but as consequence. They experience the emptiness you once filled. They feel the instability you once buffered. They face the chaos you once softened. And in that confrontation, something shifts. Some grow, some don't. That outcome is not yours to manage. This is where your maturity is tested, not in how you feel, but in how you respond. When the past returns, do you romanticize it, or do you interpret it? Do you feel flattered, or do you feel clear? Do you reopen the door, or do you thank God for the confirmation? The law of return does not demand engagement. It offers evidence. Notice how your body responds now compared to before. Before, a message might have sent you spiraling. Now, it lands softly. Before, a thought might have consumed your day. Now, it passes.
Before, you might have needed explanation. Now, you already know. This is the law of return completing its work. It shows you that you are no longer emotionally available for cycles that once owned you. Chosen one, you are not obligated to respond to every return. You are not required to explain your growth. You do not owe access to people who appear only when they feel the loss. Closure does not require conversation. Often, closure is simply recognition that the attraction remains, but the attachment is gone. The law of return also teaches discernment about timing. Just because something returns does not mean it belongs in your present. Some things return only to show you they no longer fit. Some people reappear so you can finally say no from a place of peace instead of pain. That no is not rejection. It is graduation. When you can look at the past without desire, without resentment, without urgency, you have completed the cycle. The return loses its power. The law fulfills its purpose. And what once felt like temptation becomes testimony. So when the past resurfaces, breathe, observe, bless, and keep moving. You are not being pulled backward, you are being shown forward. The return is not about them. It is about you seeing yourself clearly. In the next section, we will talk about the most subtle trap of all, how temptation often disguises itself as familiarity, and how to choose discernment over desire when old energy tries to re-enter your life through emotional language.